Today I'm going to talk about this painting. Actually, it's a sequel to a talk I gave several years ago in which I identified, I think, the only surviving image of my scientific hero from the 17th century. Here he is, Robert Hooke. But today's talk, as I say, is a sequel, and I'm going to entitle it With Minor Differences. And I'm going to address a question about whether it includes a secret of Samuel Pepys. And there's a question, why did Samuel Pepys have his copy of the enormous Verrio mural expanded, but also squeezed? Here's the entry on the picture from the Photographic Archive of the Paul Mellon Center. You can see it's James II receiving the mathematical scholars of Christ's Hospital. Down in the corner you can see that it's a painting by Antonio Verrio, a replica of the oil painting at Christ's Hospital, Horsham, with minor differences. See the sale catalog. So here's the entry from the sale catalog. A replica of the oil painting at Christ's Hospital, Horsham, although the left-hand niche and the figures in front of it do not appear in the oil picture. So here's the oil picture, the original oil, the one at Christ's Hospital in Horsham. And on the left, you see a niche. And if we blow it up, you can see that it does appear in the painting, but it's empty. If we compare it to the right-hand niche, you can see that that one contains the allegory of astronomy. So is there nothing in the left-hand niche? Is this indeed the original oil? It has spent 337 years in a school dining hall with hundreds and hundreds of children and their food and the vapors from their food beneath it, candles too. It was new in 1688 when it was hung, but it was rehung on a different wall, then in a new building, then at a different town altogether in Horsham. It was relined, it's been restored, and it's been cleaned many times. So essentially every 70 years since late 17th century, something's been done to it. So how original is it in its current state? Well, we can look at what it looked like in 1902 after cleaning and restoration. You can see that the right-hand niche was also empty at that time. But it was cleaned in 1963, and they found the allegory of astronomy, although they also showed the ledge around the niche, as you can see. So currently astronomy is there. Might there have been something in the left-hand niche as well? Well, let's think a little bit about what this painting is. In the first place, is it the original oil? We'll call it original. It's enormous. It's 26 meters long. And 5 meters high. It's as big as 3 London double-decker buses lined up. It has 128 life-size subjects. Now, what is Christ's Hospital? It's a school for orphans that was established in 1552 in Newgate in London. And it continues to this day, although it's no longer only orphans. What were the mathematical scholars? Well, the painting, as you can see, is in 3 panels. And if we look at the right panel, we see the mathematical scholars in their blue robes. These are 40 boys from the school who were selected for training to become navigators. And James II is entertaining them at a New Year's reception. He hosted annual receptions at New Year's for the RMS scholars and school governors. Here behind him is Charles II, who actually founded the Royal Mathematical School 15 years earlier. But he died 2 years before this painting was done. So he's been relegated to the wall. And also there is the founder of Christ's Hospital itself, Edward VI, the boy king, son of Henry VIII, who founded the hospital in 1552. On the left panel, we can see the Christ's Hospital girls. They would not have attended a Royal Mathematical School reception. The scene is a fanciful one. Now we can go back and look at the painting in more detail during its 1901 move to Horsham from London. You can see that part of the painting is protected by paper pasted on top. So the left niche we can't see at that time in this picture, although there appears to be some sort of rip across it. The frame has been removed, which allows us to look in detail at the bottom of the picture. Let's look right here with the girls. You can see that the painting is resting on a wooden support. And you can see blank canvas at the bottom of the painting. So the painting begins at the yellow line there. And now we can superimpose what the painting looks like now after restoration. So there's the bottom of the painting. Now we can compare that with the 1/10 scale copy that was commissioned by Samuel Pepys a few years later in the early 1690s. And you can see that he's added about 5% to the bottom of the mural. It would be about a foot in the original mural. But why did he expand it? And also squeeze it. So here's this original mural, the left panel, and the empty niche. And we can compare it with the copy that was made by Verriot for Pepys. So here's the copy. And you can see that in the copy, the niche is not empty. There's the allegory of geography there. So it's paired with astronomy because of their relevance to navigation. This is a school for young navigators. Notice that the pilasters align, but the people do not align. They've been shifted over. However, if we look at the right, we can see that they haven't all been shifted over. In fact, the people in the right part of this image have been squeezed. And you can see how they've been squeezed. Compare the matron here and her neighbor. You can see below that they've been moved closer together. Or these two girls. Again, they've been moved closer together. Or the extended arm of this girl has been retracted. So we have a question. The bottom has been expanded and it's been squeezed side to side. Why? Well, it was apparently to make room for this group of new people. So Pepys wanted to make space for 7 new individuals, a man, perhaps his wife, perhaps their daughter and a second daughter, some functionary, a nurse, and an infant. These new individuals I called generic. What do I mean by that? Well, compare them with these shifted figures from the left end of the original mural. Here's the copy, and here's the original. And if we look at them in more detail, To my eye, these individuals in the original look realistic. I can imagine them being particular individuals. But in the copy, although this man looks realistic, this one to me looks generic. I can't imagine that that's a real effort to portray a particular individual. So to my eye, fewer than 30 of the 151 individuals in Pepys' copy seem realistic. More than half of these have at least tentatively been identified. For example, Walkling has suggested that this might be the courtier Charles de Saint-Evremond, who you see a picture by Kneller there. So why go to all the trouble to squeeze in another 7 individuals if they're just generic, not real people? Might it be just to balance the Murrell's family group at the far end of the right panel? Maybe. Or might this have been a ruse? Consider the infant, which is unique in the painting. There's no other infant. Why add an infant to the picture? The minimum age was 7 for Christ's hospital care, so it can't be someone representing the hospital. And why is he so low that required adding space at the bottom to get him in? Well, if we look at their eyes, we can see the infant is looking up in this direction. But the nurse is looking straight ahead. What are they looking at? Aha, the dog. That's natural enough. Or might the infant be looking at the king? From this low position, the infant seems to look at the dog, but he's also looking at the king. In fact, this inconspicuous infant down in the left corner in the copy is the only individual on the left side who's actually looking at King James. Consider the girls. Not one of them is looking at King James. Even the one in the front of the group, number 42, is looking to the right, is not looking at the king. Or consider these courtiers. Maybe at least 43 and 45 are looking to the right, but they don't seem really to be looking at the king. So probably not. The infant is the only one who's actually looking at the king. Why? Well, we need to consider the historical context. Verrio's original oil, late 1687, and the copy for Pepys, early 1690s, were created in a particularly tumultuous politico-religious period. The Glorious Revolution began in November 1688, just after the Verrio original oil and before the Pepys copy. Here's the Lord Treasurer. In January 1687, James dismissed his Lord Treasurer Lawrence Hyde, the brother of his first wife, because he would not become Catholic. James himself, in late 1688, was displaced. His heirs, William and Mary, displaced him because of the birth of his new Catholic heir, James, the Prince of Wales, 1688 to 1766. William was James's Dutch nephew, and Mary his daughter by his first wife, Anne Hyde. She had been raised Protestant under Charles II. In 1685, James had made the hanging Judge Jeffreys his Lord Chancellor. But Jeffreys was sent to the Tower in 1688 and died in prison the next year. In February 1689, Pepys lost his career as Secretary of the Admiralty, which he owed to James, his long-term patron. In March 1689 until July 1690, James fought the first Jacobite war for his restoration, supported by Louis XIV, until he lost the Battle of the Boyne and fled again. In fact, the Irish were so disappointed by his defection that he was referred to as Seamus an Chacha, James the Shit. From May to July in 1689, right during this time, and again in June 1690, Pepys was imprisoned on suspicion of Jacobitism. It was risky for him to commission this copy of an homage to James II in the early 1690s, especially for Pepys. But he must have hoped that his patron just might regain the throne, and this picture would be relevant again in his fortunes. So why do you think Pepys had this inconspicuous but incongruous infant looking at a dog squeezed into the far corner of his own private copy of the James II mural? Well, consider in late 1868, his William and Mary displaced James because of the birth of his new Catholic heir, James, Prince of Wales, in 1688, between the original oil and the copy. In December 1688, Pepys himself had signed the order for the yacht to carry James's queen, Mary of Modena, disguised as a washerwoman, and 6-month-old Prince James to safety in France with the ex-king's cousin, Louis XIV. Through failed risings in 1715, 19, and 45, James Francis Edward Stuart lived out his 78 years in exile as the old pretender to the British throne, and fathered Bonnie Prince Charlie, who returned in the 45 as the young pretender until the Battle of Culloden in 1746, which ended Jacobites' claims. So might that infant be James, the Prince of Wales? Here is Pepys. He died childless in 1703 at age 70. He had held no office for 14 years, ever since James was deposed. For 2 centuries, his copy of the Vario passed by primogeniture in the family of his nephew, John Jackson. In 1916, Jackson's 4 times great-grandson, Second Lieutenant Andrew Pepys Cockrell, at age 19, was killed by a howitzer shell on the Somme. And in 1931, Andrew's mother was widowed, and she sold the copy at Sotheby's, and also sold Kneller's 1689 portrait of Pepys. Now, it's conceivable that the copy was made to include a version of Pepys that looked much like the Kneller painting. It's tempting to think that the Kneller portrait inspired the Pepys copyist, and it wouldn't be surprising, because this is what Pepys looked like in the original oil. It's certainly more flattering. And notice the crease, the deep crease in the wig. That is a fashion that became popular in the early 1690s. So, according to Eileen Ribeiro, this might allow us to date the picture as the early 1690s. Notice that in the other versions, he doesn't have the deep part. In 1974, the copy was resold at Sotheby's to Paul Mellon, who gave it to the Yale Center for British Art in 1977. Now there's some other interesting things in it as well. Consider this, which may be another Pepys connection. This is the mural in 1687. And this is Thomas Hawker's portrait of Henry Fitzroy. They look to me remarkably similar. Look at their faces. Why feature Henry, the first Duke of Grafton, in this painting of the Royal Mathematical School reception? Well, he was exceedingly handsome, by far surpassing any of the king's other natural issue, according to John Evelyn. He had a connection to the RMS and the Navy. The 70-gun HMS Grafton had been named for him when he was 16 years old. In fact, that ship had carried Pepys to Tangier in 1683. And Grafton was Vice Admiral of the Narrow Sea at this time. He also had strong connection to James II, being his nephew, the natural son of Charles II. And he was Lord High Constable for James's coronation 2 years earlier. And he fought against his own half-brother Monmouth, who had rebelled against James in 1685. So he had strong connection both to James and to the Navy, hence the relationship to the painting. But notice in the Pepys copy that this individual looks rather different, at least to me. The jaw is completely different. He was killed at age 27 commanding the HMS Grafton in the Siege of Cork, 1690. But he was fighting against James at this time. So to the extent that Pepys had Jacobite sympathies, he may not have been all that keen to insist on a faithful image of Grafton in his copy. It's worth considering all the influence Samuel Pepys had on creation of the original oil mural and the copy. With respect to the original mural, he was deeply involved in the concept and supervision of its creation. We learn from Clifford Jones's book about the Royal Mathematical School that in 1677 already the need for a memorial to honor Charles II and his role in the inauguration of the Royal Mathematical School was first discussed, and Samuel Pepys recommended a painting. And the Mathematical Committee asked Pepys to find a suitable historian painter. In fact, Pepys interfaced between Christ's Hospital and Verio for a whole decade during which the painting was created, even after dissociating himself from the school in 1683. There's a very prominent location for a person Pepys particularly admired, Robert Hooke. You can learn more about this in the previous talk I gave on the painting, Might Robert Hooke Be in Christ's Hospital's Verio mural. Here he's placed right next to Pepys, and they're in very distinguished company. Here's Robert Jeffrey, the Lord Mayor of London, and Robert Spencer, the Earl of Sunderland, who was Lord President of the Council, and John Sheffield, the Earl of Mulgrave, who was Lord Chamberlain. And here is Christ Hospital's president in the back row, John Moore. Now look at the changes Pepys had made in his copy. First, there was a more flattering Pepys image. In the original oil, he looked like this, but in the copy, this, perhaps after Kneller. Or including the Royal Mathematical School silver badges. In the original oil, there are no badges on the pupils, but here you can see the badge, and also here and here Now, what was this badge? It showed a Royal Mathematical School boy surrounded by allegories of astronomy, geography, the two that were in the niches of the painting, and of course mathematics. And this badge was designed by Hooke. And it's mounted in the frame of Pepys' copy, a gilded version of the silver badge. It looks like he demoted the Royal Mathematical School master, Edward Paget, who was Newton's landlubber protege, whom Pepys, as Secretary of the Navy, disapproved. This is what he looks like in the oil, wearing what would be a governor's robe with gold trim. But in Pepys' copy, he's wearing a plain black robe. Replacing Grafton, remember he looked like that in the original oil, but who knows who this is in Pepys' copy. And of course, adding the inconspicuous infant, whom I think to be the Prince of Wales. There was also a change of priority. In the original painting, the Modello that Verrio had made already in 1681, Charles II was on the throne, and next to him was James, Duke of York. We know that it's James because he's leaning here on an anchor, which has a rope wrapped around it. The fouled anchor denotes the Lord High Admiral, which was James. But in the final painting, Charles has been moved from the throne to the rear wall in both the mural and the copy, while James is on the throne. But at the top, the monogram is chosen prudently by Pepys to be the monogram of Charles, not James, on his copy's frame. But still, his copy includes a Jacobite secret. So I'd like to thank people that helped me in this effort in various places. In particular, helpful were Amy Myers and Martina Droth at the Center for British Art, and Laurel Peterson. And at Christ's Hospital, Clifford Jones, Laura Kidner, and John Purvis, who went to help me there. And other historians, Andrew Walkling, Eileen Ribeiro, Keith Wrightson, and Joseph Roach. And at the V&A, Rowan Friedland showed me the Modello. And the Yale's Henry Kerner Center for Emeritus Faculty helped support my travel to see the original painting. Now, just as a little addendum, I thought I might show some things that people might like to look at on their own. This one in particular, the Two-Headed Man, who I think may be Wren, Christopher Wren.